everyone. So here's your project 5 today. What we need to do first is to download and open Portrait. I'll just click up here and show you guys. We have Portrait, Clouds, Fog, Rain 1, Rain 2, and Clouds are Clouds 1 and Clouds 2. So the first step is obviously to make sure that you right-click and duplicate that portrait to call it after, so you can do your before and after. And just remember that the portrait here, what we're trying to do is create a cinematic rain effect using this portrait, the rain, the clouds, etc. So it's kind of like a layers assignment. So you learn a little bit of new stuff in here for sure. But it's more interesting, gives you a little more depth into Photoshop. We're using a little bit of filter too. Okay, so start by opening all those files and duplicating your portrait. Unlock your background layer by double-clicking it and make sure you hit F10 and your history is open so you can go back and forth if you make a mistake. So the first thing we want to do is select our background, and we're going to delete the background. And we learned how to use the magic eraser tool the other day, so we'll start with that, but we're going to start with our selection tool to select that background. Pretty straightforward with this guy. Just make sure that your line around him is pretty clear. So what I've done is selected the background. That's the area I want to manipulate or change. I'm going to grab my magic eraser tool, make sure that the brush is big enough, and just come down and erase that background layer. Get rid of it completely. Make sure there's no little blemishes left over. Sometimes they're hard to see, and you see them later on. So you can see little bits right there. I'm going to zoom in and make sure I get those. I don't want any little pieces or shading. I'm going to get rid of all of that. Okay, and then when we're done this, it seems a little strange, but we're going to zoom back out. Make sure that we're completely done. And we're going to select him. And this is done because we're going to move him into the clouds. One of the cloud pictures, Cloud 1, this one right here. But we need to change the scale of him because he's way too big. So hit Escape, select him now individually, and just double check your selection. Make sure that you don't have any little bumps or pieces of the background included. Now that he's that size, we want to grab our Move tool and make sure that down here in the Options menu, Show Bounding Box is actually selected. So you get these handles, and we want to bring them down and make them quite small for the move. I'm just going to say okay. Looks a little rough, but we will move him and he'll look fine. So grab him and drag him now into here. And you've got him in your clouds. So again, that moving, that scaling down is really important. And drag him into your clouds. Make the clouds just a little more part of that. I'd say that's probably pretty good. Might go a little higher. Okay, so there he is in the clouds. He's a layer above, and now I'm on the cloud layer, so I need to double click or just click that lock to unlock the layer itself. Okay, next step, we're going to duplicate the portrait layer only. So this guy, we're just going to make a copy of this layer, which is layer 1. We'll just call it Portrait. Oops, I can spell. Portrait copy. Okay. Say okay. And we'll rename this one. I do that by double clicking on it. Rename it Portrait. And we'll rename this one Background, because we have to keep track of what we're doing here. Again, this be a morning no coffee thing. Okay, so we are on the duplicate layer, the portrait copy layer, I should say. We want to go to Filters and Stylize Glowing Edges. So I'm just going to show you Filter. Okay, down to Stylize. And we want to go to Glowing Edges. Okay, we're going to get this dialog box pop up. All right. Now we want to adjust him with each slider so he looks smooth and water-like. Right now he's a little too bright around him. I'm going to lower the edge width. I don't want too much of an edge width around him. Edge brightness too, I'm going to tone that down. And smoothness, we'll just play with this to show you guys you can go either way. Smooth and water-like, something like that. Low edge width though, because we don't want too much glowing around him. And low brightness, just a little bit. Now, if it doesn't look good, we can just do it again, but let's hit OK and see what happens. Okay, so there he is. And he looks a little waxy. So we can adjust our opacity down on this, okay? Just slowly adjust it down so that he looks a little bit smooth. So if I take that off, right, I'm trying to get him to a kind of a nice, smooth, glowing, waxy look. Wet but not colorful, okay? So let's just see. Maybe we can lighten him a tiny bit more. We don't want it to be too subtle. We want some definite stuff going on here, okay? And again, as I said, if I don't like it, I can go back to glowing edges, back to name change, filter, stylize again, which is right here. Go back to glowing edges and just play with those a little bit more. I think I'm going to make them a little bit lighter and say okay. And then I'm going to come back, lower my opacity down. And that's what I was looking for. A little more sort of sinister, like he's shining a flashlight in his face. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. All right, so next step is to duplicate the background layer. So that's the clouds layer. Okay. All right, so now I should have two portraits, one with the glowing edges, one normal. I should have a background layer and a background layer copy. And I'm going to set blending to overlay. So I'm going to take this background copy and I'm going to come up to normal. And I'm going to change it to overlay. Okay. I'm going to select the burn tool and come down here. Select the burn tool. Okay. I want my brush size around 400 or so. So pretty big. 407 is fine. I'll go on the low side. And I want midtones. And I want exposure to leave it at 15. And we're going to click around the clouds, just lightly around the clouds. Okay, this is darkening them a little bit. And should have the desired effect. You can see I'm not really, with a nice big brush, I'm not making it look too ridiculous. Right? I can increase exposure if I want this process to go a little faster. But I'm darkening some areas of the clouds just to make it a little more sinister, but with the burn tool, keeping the realism of the image intact, making it look good. Okay, corners, sky, etc. And this is giving him a little more contrast to the cloud too. He's nice and bright. Okay. Adjust clouds layer opacity. You could adjust this layer now. I'm going to move mine down to like maybe 86 or so. Okay. Again. Keep going. Nice and dark. So that he is standing out more is the idea. Okay. Next step. We want to duplicate the cloud layer again, and we want to drag it up over our portrait layer. I believe I'm going to do the background copy. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to drag it up over our portrait copy. Okay, so it's now above. Alrighty, everybody with me? So select it, and then select the brush tool. Make sure your size is about 400, your hardness is 0, and your opacity is 15. So lower that opacity down. somewhere around 400. Okay, hardness 0. We can do that under here. Make sure hardness is 0. Under brush settings, okay? Select white. Okay, make sure that that's selected on color. And we're going to make the portrait layer hidden. Okay, I can see kind of, I guess I can see it, the outline of him. Try to remember where he is, because we're also going to hide that extra layer of him there. We're just going to do white kind of around him a little bit so that he kind of outlines him. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're doing this. We don't want to do white way over here. We might do it to lessen the darkness of some of those clouds, but we want to do a little bit of a white sort of outline of him around him like this. Okay, so I'm going to just take that off and I'm going to go for it here. As you can see, just where he was, just to brighten it. And I can toggle. I'm just going to lighten that a little bit. I can toggle between it to show where he is and where I'm doing it. Okay, just with that Gaussian blur filter or the glowing edges filter. So toggle, come back, do a little more white. You don't want to overdo this part. You just want him to stand out, right? Not the rest of the picture. I am going to lighten those little patches though. Okay, and when I click him back on, that's the desired effect, so that he's got a bit of a white outline around him. Okay. So we want to click the eye on the portrait so we can see it again if you haven't done so already. I'm still on background copy at the top. And I'm going to select the portrait layer only. Using the brush tool with roughly the same settings as step 6. Click around the image again where the body meets the cloud so that you create a very soft flow around the edges of the portrait. Okay, so I'm just going to do that one more time. I'm going to lower my brush size though. But be careful here. You don't want to do too much. You don't want to have circles around him. This is important though for the end effect with the rain, so you'll understand when we get there. But don't do too much craziness, okay? So I think that's, for me, that's fine. That's what I would like to do. You can do a little more if you want. Don't overdo it. Okay, click on the eyes of each layer you hid to make sure they're now visible again. So make sure everything's showing and add a levels layer to the top. So I'm going to go way up here to the background copy 2. And I'm going to add, I'm going to add an adjustment layer, which is this little globe, create new fill or adjustment layer. I'm going to choose levels. Okay, so that's on the top. Make sure that's on the top or this won't work. And I'm going to change my levels adjustments settings here to 21.1 and about 217. So this is going to be 21. This is going to be 1, and this is going to be about 217. Oops. Okay, so 21, 1, and 217. All right, and then I close that levels layer. Done. Next step is click on fog or smoke. So I'm going to click on fog here. And once open, we want to use the tool to drag it down into the main project picture. So I'm going to take it, and I'm going to open my photo bin, and I'm going to drag this smoke into the image of the guy with all the glowing edges. Okay, right over top of him, just like that. No big deal. And we're going to expand it. And if it doesn't fit, just drag that sidebar over. That's not going to hurt anybody. Okay, get nice and smoky. Say okay. And we're going to set this layer to screen. So under normal again, I'm on layer 1, the very top layer, my fog layer. I'm going to change it to screen. Okay, you get the idea. We've created a screen over top of him of smoke. It took all the black out, so there we go. We can lower that if it's too much for you. I think this is too high. I like to lower it a tiny bit. Get some of the black back in there, okay? And just remember, you can duplicate that layer, set it to screen, and put that kind of fog effect in other areas when we're later on, because right now we need to kind of follow the flow of this so that we're We're making this realistic looking. Okay, place the smoke where you want it. You can also copy the layer and smoke up each side on top or below the portrait, as I just said. So what I'm saying is you can right click and duplicate the smoke layer like this. Now I've got two here, and I can spin that sideways and move it over and give myself a little smoke creeping in from the side. I can do it again, and I can spin it the other way. So I guess while we're on it, you may as well just do this as well. So you decide where you put it. It's up to you guys and how things look, but move that over, give yourself a little more smoke effect. You can do it down from the top too if you wanted. Again, we don't want to do it too much, so I'm just going to lower opacity so that I have a smoky film, but it's very nice and light, so that I'm going to lower the opacity on this one here as well. I want the dark clouds to still show through and just not to be too outrageous looking. So if I did one more, I would do it probably at the top, and I would rotate that this way. I'm grabbing the handle and I'm clicking and holding it. I'm grabbing a corner handle so I get that little curve look here, and I'm just moving it. That's how I'm twisting it, guys. Alrighty, so I'm going to pull that down a little bit and change the opacity again. All right, so that's my desired effect at the moment. So here's where it gets subjective. We're going to bring the rain in, and you can situate and move and duplicate the rain anywhere you want. Just keep that in mind as we go, okay? So right now, all of our layers open. We have our background copy, our portrait copy, the new background copy with the white. We have a levels layer, and then we have 4 different fog layers that we opened and twisted around. Okay, the next step is we're going to merge. I think we should probably merge the layers. Merge the portrait layers. I think that's what we'll do. So we'll hold Control down and click Portrait and merge these 2 layers. Okay, so it should put the 2 portrait layers together. So your glowing edges and your portrait are now one, okay? Keep everything else open at the moment because we don't want to mess with, our different layers here that we're working on. So we want to bring the rain in. So I'm going to come over here. And again, I'm adding this water. It's actually water. I'm adding it just like I did before. I'm going to drag it with the move tool into the main area and drop it on them. And it's going to make that black, it's going to make that black effect. I have to find it. So it's down here, layer 2. I'm going to make sure I'm up above layer 1. So you do that. If you drag it in again, start at layer 1, it'll put it above the layer you're selecting. Okay, so I'm going to just bring it out. I don't need to make this the whole thing. I'm just going to put it like that. And again, I'm going to add screen. Okay, get rid of the black and get that water splash look going. So now this has a bit of a splash piece. I could put that on his head, or what I might do with this one is turn it and stick part of it in the clouds and kind of pull it out a little bit more. And like I said, you can do anything with this. You can make 6 copies and add the rain all over the place. So what I might actually do with this one, just given the look of it, I might put it on his shoulder right here and just make it a little bit bigger, a little more squish that way. Again, so this is the subjectivity part. You decide where you put it and how it's going to look. Even a little bit on a suit doesn't matter. That's okay. And I'm going to pull it out that way so that it's obvious. We got some rain going on. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to grab my second rain or water, and I'm going to drag that in into the main photo. So again, I'm on my move tool, click and drop. Change that layer to screen. And that's actually even a better shoulder option for this side. So I'm just going to pull it down and drop it on his shoulder, give it a little bit of a water look. Okay, a little bit of a water look like this. Now, I don't have enough around his head, so this is where it comes to even more subjectivity. I'm going to right click and duplicate my rain layer. And now it's duplicated over here. I'm on it, so I am going to twist it. And I'm going to bring it up here and drop it. I'm going to take the other rain layer and I'm going to duplicate that layer. And we're going to twist that layer. Different vantage point, guys, so it looks interesting. And I'm going to bring it in like this. Just let it sit where it's sitting. And you can keep going this way. So back to layer 2, duplicate that layer. And I'm going to twist it around again and maybe bring it over this way and stick it up in the corner, pull it down, just so I'm getting a nice rain effect all around him. Okay, I think I'm going to do this a few more times. I'm going to duplicate layer 3. So just remember that layer 2 copy, layer 3 is the other rain effect. So layer 2 or layer 3, right? That's what you're trying to duplicate. I would do them one at a time so you don't lose track of which one you did last. As you can see, I'm going to twist this around now. Whoops. Twist this layer around. And bring it up here. Generally, I want to make the rain effect appear in most of the image around him. So layer 2, I'm going to right click and duplicate that again. And it shows me where it is. So I'm going to drag that one down, twist it around, get some water going on down here. So generally, I've got a rain effect pretty much everywhere. I might do one more up here, but right now, for the purposes of this, that's what I wanted. I gotta do one more maybe to put in front of him, cover him. He needs to be rainy looking, doesn't he? So let's duplicate another layer, move it over. I'm going to turn it just a little bit now, just a little bit to kind of flatten that out. And then I'm going to kind of pull it up. I don't really want the water part on here. And it's okay if my layer goes off the canvas. I don't really want the water part showing because that would look silly because there's a line down here. So I'm just going to turn it one more time. Make sure the rain is kind of coming up in his face a little bit. And I might leave his forehead blank. I don't know. I might just have the rain here. Again, subjectivity. I'm making the decision myself. I'm going to do a layer 3 copy over his forehead. Okay. But on this one, I'm going to move it. Oops. There we go. Layer 3 copy 3. I'm going to move it in. Oops. Carefully not dragging other layers. It gets a little tricky. I'm going to flip it so it matches the water on top. And I'm going to kind of pull it. And you'll see why this matters in the next step. Okay, done? Done. All right, so here's the crazy part. We need to motion blur all of the rain layers individually. And you'll see why in a second. So grab layer 2, start at the bottom. We're going to do layer 2 down here on the layers, and we're going to go up through all of them and motion blur them. So we want to go to filter again. We want to go to blur, and we'd like to go to a motion blur and motion blur. So we want to go to motion blur down here. And what this is going to do is it's going to create streaks in the rain to make it look like rain. So right now it's just water droplets everywhere. We want to make it look like rain. So we want to set our angle around 49. And angle is right here. So you can see that the rain will be falling on an angle down. And we want to change our pixels distance to about 150. Okay. And as you can see, if I hit OK, you see a tiny bit of it. We'll do it again on this one. we have layers over top, so we're going to have to do this effectively here. So motion, blur, 49 and 150. Okay, you're starting to see that here, the streaks. All right, next layer, filter, blur, motion blur. Okay, next layer, filter, blur, motion blur. Okay, and so on and so forth until we've done them all. I'm wondering though, if I control click, I don't know, I've never tried this, but we'll try. No, I can only do it one at a time. Okay, so filter, blur, motion blur. Your settings stay the same. That's why I'm saying okay. You don't need to do anything with them. Filter, blur, motion blur. And you might say, what happens if we lower the pixels for distance? All that does is lower the streakiness. It makes it a little more, blend a little differently. So as you can see, I can see them more. It's up to you, subjectivity. Make it look realistic, whatever you do. Not that this is realistic looking, but up to 150 again. I like the subtle because we're going to add rain droplets over top of these streaking rains as well. So don't worry too much about losing that rain droplet effect. So motion blur, 150. And our last one, filter, blur, motion blur, 150. Your settings stay the same, so you can go that quickly through it. So now we have a little bit of a rain effect going on behind them. And the next thing we want to do is we want to, we're at this nice, smooth, patchy part. What we probably want to do now is it'll appear that we moved the water effect entirely, so we can add more of the rain layers back as water droplets. So you can do that subjectively as well. One thing I'm noticing on mine, though, I'm just going to come back down. Losing all my layers here. So I'm going to go back down to portrait copy. I'm just going to go over a little bit with the blur tool and darken a tiny, tiny bit. Very, very, very subtle. Okay. So back up here, we want to add a new copy. So I can come down. I don't want to copy the layer, layer 2 or layer 3 at this time, because what I've done now is I've created a motion blur on them. So I do need to come back. I do need to click on the rain again and drag that back in as droplets. So open your photo bin, drag it back in. And again, if you remember what we did last time, I'm here above the portrait layer, so I should have done that in a different way. I should have gone to the top. But anyway, come up to the very top layer, add it, add screen. Actually, I would put it in place first. And then I would add a screen here. So I'm just going to tilt that a little bit. I'm going to say screen. So I actually like this better for his side over here. So subjectivity, once again, guys, this one, you don't have to stretch these. We're not doing this everywhere again. We're just doing a little bit to give us a little bit of a rain droplet effect, okay? I'm going to do the other one now because I like the other one for the other shoulder. And here it is. And I'm going to drag that up into the image again. I like it on his head too. And I'm going to change it to screen. And now that I've got those two on there, I can actually duplicate those two as well. I don't have to worry now about moving it in again. So I can duplicate these two top layers. So I'm going to duplicate layer 4 and move my rain effect around a little bit. Leave room for the streaks, okay? So let those streaks show through. I'm letting the darker patches of streaks show through, and I'm sort of adding the rain a little bit to the white. But again, I'm not doing much of this. I'm just going to do it a couple of times. Duplicate layer 5, the other one for the shoulder, which is up here. I'm going to put it down on the shoulder again, and I'm going to turn it and let it kind of fit that shoulder. As you can see, that's what it looks like in the dark over here. So I want to bring it in to make it look like it's running or splashing off his shoulder. Okay, we don't want much of this, so the only last one I'm going to do is I want to keep the streaks. It's really important. I'm going to put one down here on his suit though, just to give us a little realism. So I'm going to do this one. Duplicate layer 4. And I'm going to bring it down, and I'm going to twist it around so that the water's coming up. Just like that, a little bit. Completely subjective, guys, how you want this to look, but that's where I want mine. Okay, done? Done. Next step. We want to add a little bit more of the smoke layer, like I was saying. We want to give him a sinister look and darken his face, red his skin. So we're going to select the smoke layer. So come back down your layers and find that smoky layer. We had 4 of them, so it could be a number of different smoke layers. I'm just going to select this one for now. And we're going to do a gradient tool, foreground transparent, select radial gradient blend, darker color, opacity 55. So we're going to make sure that our smoke layer, actually, we're going to bring our smoke layer in. Let's do this. Bring our smoke layer in above his portrait. So click on the portrait, copy, come down to your smoke again, your image, and we're going to drag it back into the image because the other one's being used for other purposes, okay? Make sure that that's still above him, and we're going to expand it. Okay, as you can see. And we're going to say screen. All right, so there's our smoke layer. Now we're going to highlight the smoke layer, and we're going to do a gradient tool on it. Okay, so let's just pull it up, make sure it's right up there and fills the whole space. So I'm going to go to gradient tool, apply that transformation, sorry. Apply gradient tool. All right, and I want to make sure that I'm foreground to transparent. So right now I'm transparent to foreground. So I probably can just reverse that. Foreground to transparent. Okay, and you can tell by coming in here, foreground to background, foreground to transparent. Okay, depends, I guess it flips it back. Depends which side. Oh, I have it on reverse. There we go. Okay, so that's foreground to transparent. You just hover over it, it'll tell you what it is. Okay, so I'm on foreground to transparent. I want to make sure that I select the radial gradient blend, which is over here. This is radial gradient. And I want to make sure that the blend is not on normal, but it's darker color. So I'm going to go up to darker color right here. And I want to make sure the opacity is 55. Okay. Everybody got it? So I'm going to click on the left or right of my image and drag the line across it and drop it on the other side. So I'm just going to go like this. Click here, drag my line across the image and drop it. Okay. You can see it's starting to change it. Now, I believe we can keep clicking on it to darken it. And you can go any particular way. Okay. See how quickly that changes the portrait copy too. So we don't want to do that there as much, or at least as dark. All right, so let's keep going. I'm going to increase my opacity a little bit. And I'm going to change, right now I'm doing white, so I'm going to change this to a kind of a darker color. Maybe even like a color like that. Okay, still on the same opacity. Still on my fog layer. Okay. And you can change this to any particular color you want to give it a different look. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next I'm gonna do one more maybe here. Just looking at it. Okay. So merge all the layers. And you do this by clicking on the background layer and select merge visible. So all our layers are wide open. We're gonna come right down to the bottom one. So this is what, just so you guys know, this is what a layers assignment will inevitably look like when you complete one as a project. That would be your next project actually. So you're getting an idea of how they work. This is the bottom of the stack. All of these are above the bottom. I'm gonna right click, okay, and I say merge visible on the very bottom layer. Okay, and now it looks like a background layer is all I have, but it's actually this. Alrighty, so I'm going to go to Enhance menu, and I'm going to say Shadows and Highlights. So up here in Enhance, I'm going to go to Adjust Lighting, and I'm going to say Shadows and Highlights. All right, pull that over so you can see what you're doing. And we want to play with the sliders for the desired effect. So I would like to make the shadows darker and darken the highlights to give him a kind of a crazy look. And mid-tone contrast just is about saturation. I don't want to go that far. That doesn't, it's okay, but it's not the desired effect for this. So I'm just going to pull it back a little bit. Right? Darken highlights, it's a little too dark. Keep my shadows dark. Right? And hit OK when you have the desired effect you're looking for. And last but not least, I'm going to take that burn tool and I'm going to go over highlights and I'm going to darken some of these areas. Right, just to give it a little more of a deep, dark craziness. Okay, so getting the desired effect. And you're going to choose your own. I'm going to do brightness and contrast too, actually. I think that's a good one to do. I believe brightness contrast, okay? So you're going to slide this how you want to create the brightness or the contrast. So just play with it to see what contrast does. And bring my contrast up and my brightness down and say okay. And again, this is up to you. You can crop it closer if you want. You can add more water if you want and keep it going. You can add some filters too to achieve a real cinematic look like noise or Gaussian blur. So I can do that too. Just under here, filter, I can do a noise filter and add noise, right, to give me that sort of shady, strange look. As you can see what it does to your image. So you might want to lower the percentage, maybe to 6. And you get that monochromatic. You do that as well. And hit OK. Another thing you could do is Gaussian blur. So under blur, Gaussian blur filter, right? And that would have to be very subtle because right now it's looking a little crazy. Okay, got it? So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop him, just shoulder length, or just at the shoulders, I think. Make sure I've got enough of what I want in the image. And say okay. And of course, we're going to go back to our original. And we're going to highlight him, make him smaller. As a matter of fact, what we should probably do first is crop him as well. It's about the same as the other, okay? So a little bit of edge on each side and crop, okay? Now I'm going to grab him, make him smaller, And I'm going to come back to my finished image and drag him in. Okay. I'm going to adjust my canvas size. So I go image, resize, canvas size. And I'm going to make my width about twice. Move him over to 1, bring him in, and expand him as well. Okay. Maybe even a little bit bigger. Okay, crop the two of them together. And you are done and ready to turn that in. Cinematic portrait rain effect. Get her done.